Welcome back, Camden Catholic. Man, it's been a little bit since we've had a flip, but we got some time on our hands, so let's get after it, all right? I've got 13 minutes right now until my last bell rings, so let's keep going. Let's get going. Let's get some stuff done. Whenever the bell rings, it'll be when we finish up, okay? But let's go. So we left off on this in class. We talked about how San Martin, and Simon Bolivar are going to liberate northern and southern South America and meet each other in the middle in Peru, right? We talked about how these liberation movements were brought on by the invasions of Napoleon and the fact that the Spanish troops had been withdrawn and were heavily distracted, right? So Bolivar, in his victory over the Spanish in northern South America, is going to lead a new country that he calls Gran Colombia, all right? So Gran Colombia is made up of several northern South American countries. But as you can see here, San Martin helped liberate this entire region, and then Bolivar is going to liberate this entire region. So Gran Colombia, though, looked like this, all right? So as you can tell, it is huge. It includes modern-day Panama, Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, several countries. And because Bolivar's vision, write this down, please. Bolivar's vision of a united South America was present-day Colombia, Ecuador, Venezuela, and Panama. Wow, I just said that. Short-lived, though. This large country is not going to survive forever. And it's mainly just due to dissension amongst the various factions, okay? As in, the Venezuelans didn't want to have to possibly be led by an Ecuadorian, or the Colombians didn't want to have to be led by a Panamanian, right? So it was very, very short-lived due to the breakup of the different groups. So Bolivar is going to resign in 1928, and then in 1830, Gran Colombia is going to be divided up into Colombia, Ecuador, and Venezuela. Colombia is going to hold on to Panama going into 1910 when the Americans finally back a small revolution so we can actually dig our canal through it, right? Now, Panama is going to later split with the U.S. census in 1903. Canal comes in soon after, around 1910, okay? So very, very good stuff. Very impressed. Pause it if you need to write that down some more. But let's go ahead and talk about the results. Really, really quick. You ain't got to write any of this other stuff down. But write this down actually really fast. Mexico is going to rebel, gain their independence. Brazil rebels against Portugal, gains their independence, right? So the Latin American liberation movements had a lot of different motivations, as we can tell. But the main thing we want to focus on is the results, right? Political and social results are going to lead to continual battles over rule between liberals and conservatives. And what I mean by that is like liberals that want change and a breakaway from the Catholic Church, and conservatives that want to keep things the way they were and remain as close to the same, I guess you could say, as they possibly could. And then the economic result was Latin America is kind of in the state economically that it's in today due to the fact that it was unable to free itself from dependence on Western-controlled economic patterns, right? The big thing called the Monroe Doctrine, which actually made it so they were linked and like just absolutely tied to the United States. So like in our economic pattern, so it's very, very difficult for them to create international economies of their own. Culturally, though, it's one of the coolest things because cultural diffusion, yes, is going to create a brand new race of Latin American people. They're the youngest race on the planet. They're brand spanking new. They're pretty freaking awesome, if you ask me. So these are the big results of those Latin American independence movements. But the new world map is beginning to form itself. There is a South America that has countries of its own that are no longer ruled over by France. There's a Mexico that's no longer ruled over, why did I say France? By Spain. There's a Mexico that's no longer ruled over by France because they actually took over at one point. Or by Spain, and they're a free country all their own. It's amazing stuff, right? So, but now let's get into what was going on back in Europe real quick. And let's talk about... Where you at? There it is. Rep yo hood, nationalism, okay? So, some kids are always like, oh, write nationalism, big old letters. Or you can write this in big old letters. Something to separate the Latin American independence movements from the nationalism section, okay? So, let's talk about how nationalism began in the, during this entire time period, okay? So just to give you a heads up, underneath nationalism, right, put a star right there, and put the Industrial Revolution started around 1750 and did not end until 1850. So what I'm getting at is the last thing we'll talk about before we get into World War I is the Industrial Revolution. or actually we'll probably talk about it right after nationalism going into imperialism, right? The reason why I haven't talked about it yet is because it's a change in lifestyles, and nationalism is so much more political in a sense, okay? So I'm going to talk about this nationalism, or I'm going to go Latin American independence, nationalism, industrialism, imperialism, okay? Because I think the industrialism and the imperialism ideas share a lot of common traits, okay? So we'll end up jumping way backwards for the industrialism piece, but you'll see where we get there when we get there. So, but Rep Yo Hood is what I used to say when I used to teach at Northern Durham High School, simply because Rep Yo Hood is about representing your neighborhood, being proud of where you're from, pride in that idea, right? I'm very proud of my Southern roots. So we're getting into now nationalism. And nationalism, first question you got to ask, what the heck is it, right? Well, what nationalism is defined in by Webster is, right, the first one. It's patriotic feelings, principles, or efforts, okay? As in an extreme form of pride or superiority in your country over others. Okay, so do you believe that it's an extreme sense of pride? It's pride and like an idea that your culture has a genius and that you should have a country of your own, right? So nationalism in our terms is strong feelings of pride for one's culture, country, or identity. It doesn't necessarily have to be just about a country. It can be about a group of people. It can be about your race. It can be about all kinds of different stuff, right? And nationalism can be positive. It doesn't have to be negative. It doesn't have to be like, I'm better than other people. It can be anything it wants to be, right? So nationalism, though, is strong feelings of pride for your country, culture, or identity, okay? So let's get into the roots of nationalism now, though. Get it? Nationalism, follow me. Anyway, now, and how it's going to create Germany, okay? It's going to create Germany. Make sure you're not muting me. Don't write all this stuff down, but we're getting all the way up to a guy that I think is pretty awesome, Otto von Bismarck, all right? So the main thing you got to focus on, though, is that in the early 1800s, German-speaking people lived in a ton of different informal states, okay? What I mean by that is when Napoleon, write this down, when Napoleon invaded the Holy Roman Empire, the HRE dissolved, okay? Because the guy who was in charge of it stepped down. When that happened, what was left up in the air was like 300 different informal principalities where they spoke German, they did German things, they did all kinds of stuff, right? But the most important of these informal states, don't write Austria, is mainly Prussia, all right? Prussia. Don't write this down, but not Russia, Prussia, okay? So, as you can see right here, this is from 1807 to 1871, but in 1807, when the breakup happened, right, in the early 1800s, look at all this. All these crazy little informal principalities. Bavaria is a really, really big one, but Prussia is the biggest and the baddest, okay? The Prussians had existed for a long, long time. They're one of the only huge, large-based principalities that is a very prominent figure in European history. But they speak German. They are of German cultural and heritage. They are extremely militaristic, and they have been led by the Hohenzollern family for like years and years and years. Okay, so write that name down really quick. Hohenzollern. The Hohenzollerns. All right, the Hohenzollerns had led Prussia since Frederick the Great Elector. It was actually the leader of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, anyway, getting into it though, who ruins everything and kind of caused all this unification process? That's right, your main man. Napoleon, right? Ruins everything for everybody in Europe, unless you're French. So what this is due to the fact of the Napoleonic Wars, right? So Napoleonic Wars are going to create this toss-up of all these principalities where there was no Germany at this point. It was just the Holy Roman Empire. So when the Holy Roman Empire dissolves because of these series of wars from 1803 to 1815, when Napoleon tried to create one gigantic chunk, like huge Europe with French culture at the heart of it, there's going to be a lot of instability. Because who the heck gets what 1815 when he gets banished to Elba? Who's in charge? Oh, we don't know, right? Danny? Mason? What you got? Who's in charge? I don't know either, right? So what's going to happen, though, is, as you can see right here, the Confederation of the Rhine, that's all the German area with Prussia right here. So this is all Germany and German-speaking people. Even this area right here inside the French Empire under Napoleon. German-speaking people that were taken over by the French. So, what happens to Napoleon eventually, though? He invades these lands in 1806. He wants to create a unified European state with French culture at its heart because he's very nationalistic about his French culture. And Prussia, though, during this is going to be allowed to stay independent. But the German states were now under the control of France in 1806, okay? So you've got the Holy Roman Empire goes, and it falls, right, and becomes the Confederation of the Rhine. It's controlled by the French, okay? So getting into it, though, Germans see themselves as very, very different, okay? Hold on. Yeah, so they see themselves as very, very different, okay? They don't think they're French. They are German-speaking people. They demand a unified German state because they have German cultural and heritage, right? Napoleon is going to lose hold of these lands by 1821 following the Battle of Waterloo when he officially gets cracked in the mouth, okay? And he's going to be exiled after his 100 Days campaign. During this entire time, though, a meeting had been held, okay? It's called the Congress of Vienna. We're going to talk about that tomorrow and why it's such a landmark event in European history. We're going to talk about how basically there's only two parts of European history. There's before and then there's after Napoleon. There's the bell, though, all right? I got to go. I'll talk to you guys later. Have a great evening, guys.